The past holds truth stranger than fiction, and some secrets have been buried for millennia, until now. Welcome to Strange History. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's get into the video. Imagine a city at the edge of the known world, marble white, sun-drenched, humming with traders' voices and the hiss of the Mediterranean against stone docks. Ships from Greece, Babylon, India, and Africa crowded its harbors, their sails heavy with spices, papyrus, gold, and rumor. This was Alexandria, the crown jewel of the ancient world, a city designed to outshine Athens and Babylon combined. And at its heart stood a dream so audacious that even today, its loss feels like a wound that never healed, the Great Library. But what few realize is that the Library of Alexandria was never just a collection of scrolls. It was an operation, the largest intelligence project in human history. Behind its polished columns and scent of ink, kings, scholars, and priests competed for something deeper than knowledge. They wanted control over truth itself. It began with Alexander the Great. When he conquered Egypt in 331 BC, he envisioned a city that would unite the wisdom of East and West. But after his death, the dream fell into the hands of his general Ptolemy I Soter, who saw knowledge not as enlightenment but as power. He built the library, or rather, ordered it built, as part of a vast research complex called the Mausoleum, or Temple of the Muses. It wasn't just a library, it was a university, a laboratory, and a royal think tank. At its height, the library may have contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls, every work known to mankind. Ships entering the harbor were searched by royal decree. Any manuscripts found were seized, copied by skilled scribes, and the copies returned to their owners. The originals? They stayed in Alexandria. It was a global intellectual heist sanctioned by kings. But what kind of knowledge were they hoarding? According to later historians, the library housed everything: philosophy, astronomy, poetry, medicine. Yet there were whispers that something else was being collected: writings from priests of Egypt, mystics of Persia, even fragments from destroyed temples of Jerusalem. Documents that didn't fit neatly into Greek logic. Texts that spoke of creation before creation, of gods who walked as men, of a light that gave birth to time itself. Most modern scholars dismiss these tales as legends. But fragments found later, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Hermetica, and other arcane manuscripts, hint that the library's purpose may have gone far beyond learning. Imagine the implications. In one vast hall, by torchlight, Greek mathematicians could have been comparing their geometries to Babylonian star charts. Egyptian priests might have explained to visiting philosophers how the soul traveled through constellations after death. There are records that Pythagoras and Plato drew heavily from Egyptian teachings. Alexandria was the point where all these rivers of thought met and clashed. Behind closed doors, certain scrolls were restricted to royal eyes only. These contained what they called forbidden knowledge, lost sciences of Egypt, accounts of vanished civilizations, and prophesied about the cycles of the world. It is said that in these texts lay the foundations for technologies that seemed like miracles, ways to harness energy through resonance, to heal through sound, even to preserve consciousness. But such power attracts enemies. The library's brilliance cast long shadows. Outside its walls, religions and empires shifted uneasily. To the priests of traditional Egypt, the library threatened millennia of spiritual authority. To foreign powers, it was a potential weapon. To the new, rising faiths, its polytheistic and philosophical chaos was dangerous. And so began the long, slow war over what humanity was allowed to know. The first great blow came not from ignorance, but from politics. In 48 BC, Julius Caesar found himself cornered in the city during a civil war with the forces of Ptolemy XIII. To gain an advantage, Caesar ordered the harbor ships set ablaze, a move that spread fire through the docks and, by misfortune or design, into the warehouse district that held part of the library's collection. Ancient writers describe flames leaping skyward as thousands of scrolls turned to ash. Yet here's what most people never hear: the library wasn't destroyed in a single night. It lingered for centuries, dying piece by piece. Some of its scrolls had already been copied and hidden. Others were moved to satellite collections, one within the Serapeum Temple, another possibly in royal vaults. knowledge like that doesn't vanish overnight, it goes underground. And as it did, new forces took notice. The Romans, inheritors of Greek glory, valued the library but feared its secrets. Scholars such as Galen and Strabo mention accessing parts of its archives long after Caesar's fire. Yet by then, certain documents were missing, especially those dealing with ancient cosmology and creation myths. Those texts, it seems, had been quietly removed. Where did they go? Some historians suspect they were smuggled east, to libraries in Ansha or Pergamon. Others claim monks in the Judean desert safeguarded fragments. There's even evidence that early Christian scholars had access to texts from Alexandria, writings that shaped Gnostic thought, the mysterious branch of Christianity that spoke of hidden knowledge and divine sparks trapped within flesh. If that's true, then the Library of Alexandria was not only a house of learning, it was a bridge between the pagan world and the dawn of Christianity. And that made it dangerous. Because if certain scrolls contradicted the new orthodoxy, they had to disappear. As the centuries turned, the library's identity blurred. Was it burned again during the invasion of Emperor Aurelian? Was it destroyed by Christians who saw it as a temple of idols? Or was it finally obliterated by Muslim conquerors in the 7th century? No one can say for certain, because each account comes from a victor, and victors edit history. But evidence points to something stranger. Ancient inventories mention locked chambers within the Mausoleum that even royal librarians couldn't access. One Greek scholar wrote cryptically about a vault beneath the sea, where light was forbidden. That line baffled translators for centuries, until divers in the 20th century discovered submerged ruins near the modern Alexandrian harbor. Among them were columns, stairways, and massive blocks etched with hieroglyphs describing the House of Eternal Fire. Could that have been a hidden archive, a subterranean vault designed to preserve what the flames above destroyed? If so, then maybe, just maybe, not everything was lost. Because in the centuries after the library's supposed destruction, knowledge that should have perished somehow survived. Mathematics, geometry, alchemy, even fragments of ancient astronomy, reappeared mysteriously in later cultures. Arab scholars in Baghdad's House of Wisdom cited sources they claimed came from the Greek lands by the sea. And during the European Renaissance, manuscripts surfaced in Italy and Spain containing ideas almost identical to those once attributed to Alexandrian scholars. It was as if the library had left behind a ghost, invisible but whispering across time. And what if that ghost still exists today? That's where the story begins to twist. Because modern excavations have found things that defy the official narrative, clues buried not just in sand, but in architecture, language, and legend. These fragments suggest that the Library of Alexandria may never have been fully destroyed. Instead, its most sensitive knowledge, the kind that could upend religion and reshape science, might have been deliberately hidden. Hidden not to protect it from invaders, but to protect the world from it. They say history is written by the victors. But in Alexandria, it was buried by them. When archaeologists began excavating the ancient city's shoreline in the 1990s, they expected to find shattered columns and broken amphorae, the usual relics of a drowned metropolis. What they didn't expect were structures that didn't belong to any known architectural era. Blocks of granite weighing dozens of tons, carved with hybrid inscriptions, part Greek, part Egyptian, and patterns that matched no known temple or tomb. Among these ruins, divers found tablets etched with images of scrolls arranged in circular chambers, a library beneath the sea. Historians at first dismissed the idea as coincidence. But when radiocarbon dating placed some of these ruins at the exact time frame of the Mausoleum, skepticism turned to alarm. What if the library hadn't vanished in fire, but had been moved, section by section, into a hidden complex designed to outlast war and time? Whispers about a secret archive beneath the royal palace date back to the Roman occupation. Several texts hint at a vault of the sun, guarded by initiates of Serapis, a deity blending Greek and Egyptian elements, symbolizing unity of faith and science. The cult of Serapis flourished precisely when the library did, suggesting the two were intertwined. To join the priesthood of Serapis, initiates reportedly underwent tests of mathematics, astronomy, and metaphysics, as if their worship was a coded study of the cosmos itself. Why such secrecy? Because by that point, knowledge was no longer just enlightenment, it was heresy. After Caesar's civil war, Alexandria came under Roman rule. The emperors tolerated scholarship, but they also feared it. Rome was pragmatic, power came from legions, not libraries. Yet Alexandria's thinkers continued to push boundaries. Herophilus dissected the human body to map the nervous system, Eratosthenes measured the Earth's circumference with astonishing precision. And in the upper halls of the Mausoleum, scholars debated whether the sun, not the Earth, was the center of the universe, centuries before Copernicus. Ideas like these could shatter empires built on divine right. Roman administrators began tightening control. The libraries foreign visitors were watched, scrolls deemed philosophically dangerous were restricted. Records show that Emperor Claudius, himself a scholar, ordered a separate annex for books of doubtful nature. These were not destroyed, they were sealed. Sealed, perhaps, in the very vaults now lying beneath the sea. Fast forward to the 3rd century AD. Alexandria had become a city of contradictions, a glittering hub of culture built on layers of fear. Pagan temples stood beside Christian meeting houses, scholars walked the same streets as zealots. It was a ticking time bomb. Then came Hypatia, the last great philosopher of Alexandria. A mathematician, astronomer, and teacher, she inherited the final fragments of the library's wisdom. Her lectures drew both pagan and Christian students, and by all accounts, she preached tolerance and reason. But reason had become dangerous. In 415 AD, a mob incited by religious leaders attacked her carriage, dragged her through the streets, and tore her apart. They accused her of sorcery, the oldest weapon used against knowledge. With her death, the last light of the library flickered out. Or did it? Because only months later, several of her disciples vanished, among them, Theon's son, who had access to the last surviving codices of the Mausoleum. Legends say they fled south, carrying scrolls wrapped in waxed linen. Some accounts place them in the desert monasteries of Egypt, others say they boarded ships bound for Cyprus, or even India. If you look at early medieval manuscripts, you find curious anomalies, sudden leaps in mathematics, fragments of lost Greek works, and symbols that resemble Egyptian cosmograms. Traces of Alexandria scattered across time, like embers carried by the wind. But the real mystery lies in why so many forces sought to erase it all. Was it really about religion, or something deeper? According to the few surviving Hermetic texts, the library's inner teachings revolved around the concept of divine correspondence, as above, so below. It implied that the structure of the heavens mirrored that of man, that the universe was not a cold machine but a living mind. Modern readers might call it mysticism, but to ancient scholars, it was a science, one that united physics, spirit, and geometry. If such knowledge existed, formulas describing consciousness, the hidden energy behind matter, imagine how threatening that would be to any authority claiming to speak for the gods. Control knowledge, and you control reality. And so, one by one, the keepers of that knowledge were silenced. The Serapeum, which housed the library's last branch, was destroyed in 391 AD under orders of Christian Emperor Theodosius. Eyewitnesses described soldiers breaking statues, burning scrolls, and toppling idols. Yet a few scrolls were reported to have been rescued by friends among the priests. Later church fathers, notably Clement of Alexandria, wrote cryptic remarks suggesting he had read texts from the House of Serapis, which raises a stunning possibility. What if the church itself inherited part of the library's collection? That could explain why certain ideas, the divine word, the logos, the hidden knowledge of creation, appear both in Greek philosophy and early Christian writings. The transition from pagan to Christian Alexandria wasn't a clean break, it was a fusion, a quiet transfer of wisdom beneath the surface of faith. But not everything could be absorbed. Some texts were simply too volatile. These, historians believe, were destroyed. Yet a minority of scholars suspect something bolder, that they were hidden deliberately, waiting for a time when humanity was ready. Centuries later, Arabic conquerors entered Egypt under Caliph Omar. The story goes that when asked what to do with the remaining books of Alexandria, he declared, if they agree with the Quran, they are superfluous, if they disagree, they are dangerous. And so they were burned to heat the city's bathhouses for months. Most historians consider that tale exaggerated. But behind the legend lies a truth. By then, Alexandria's knowledge had become too vast, too disruptive. Every conqueror, pagan or Christian or Muslim, understood the same thing: knowledge is the ultimate weapon, and it must be controlled. But here's where the trail takes an unexpected turn. In 1898, French archaeologist Jean-Yves Empereur discovered fragments of ancient glass near the harbor, glass so pure it required techniques unknown in that era. Mixed among the ruins were strange crystalline spheres, inscribed with patterns resembling star charts, but with constellations that didn't match our sky. Were they symbolic? Astronomical? Or something else? A century later, in 1995, sonar mapping of the same area revealed an underground chamber sealed by massive doors. Its position matched ancient descriptions of the Vault of the Sun. The chamber remains largely unexplored due to safety concerns, but early probes showed remnants of wooden shelves, traces of papyrus ash, and faint glyphs resembling both Greek and Coptic characters. No one has officially declared it part of the library, but among historians, whispers persist. Some even claim photos exist, suppressed, classified, or lost. If the library's hidden archive was real, it means that not all knowledge perished, some of it still sleeps beneath the Mediterranean. And the question becomes, what was so dangerous that entire empires conspired to bury it? Because across different cultures, Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, one pattern recurs: the idea that before recorded history, a civilization of immense wisdom existed. A civilization that mastered the harmony of science and spirit, only to fall when it tried to play God. The Library of Alexandria may have been their last echo, a repository of what remained of that forgotten age. And if that's true, then the fire that destroyed the library wasn't an accident. It was a purge. A deliberate act to erase humanity's memory of what it once knew, and what it once was. The desert wind moaned softly outside the walls of Baghdad's grandest building, a place the Caliph al-Ma'mun called Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. Inside, lamplight shimmered on copper astrolabes, ink pots, and scrolls stacked higher than a man's shoulders. Scholars in flowing robes whispered in Greek, Syriac, Persian, and Arabic, translating, copying, comparing. On the central table lay something rare, a scroll written in a dead dialect of Greek, its edges charred, its ink faded to ghost grey. Al-Ma'mun himself bent over it, eyes glinting beneath a silk turban. "This one," he murmured, "speaks of the stars as gates of the soul." It came from Alexandria. The librarian, a stooped man from Syria, nodded. "It was found in the ruins of Memphis, my lord. The markings on the case, they bear the seal of Serapis." The caliph's expression darkened. "Then guard it well. For if the priests of any faith learn what is written here, they will burn us all." He gestured to the scribes, and the scratching of pens resumed. The light of Alexandria had been extinguished in Egypt, but in the east, its embers were glowing again. Centuries had passed since the library's flames blackened the Egyptian sky. But knowledge, like water, finds new channels. After Hypatia's death, scholars fleeing the chaos of Alexandria carried what they could: texts, instruments, ideas, across the Mediterranean. Some went north to Byzantium, others east to Persia, where they found refuge among Zoroastrian priests and Nestorian monks. These guardians copied the scrolls into Aramaic and Syriac, preserving fragments of works long thought lost. When the Islamic Empire rose, it absorbed these scholars, not as enemies, but as teachers. The caliphs of Baghdad hungered for knowledge of the heavens, medicine, and the mysteries of creation. They sent agents west, buying or seizing every ancient manuscript they could find. And among those treasures came whispers of the Library of Alexandria. The Beit al-Hikmah became a second Alexandria, a place where Greek philosophy met Arabic astronomy, where the language of geometry merged with the poetry of revelation. But hidden among the familiar treatises, Aristotle, Euclid, Galen, were stranger works. Manuscripts that no one could trace, attributed to authors whose names existed nowhere else. They spoke of harmonies of the spheres, of divine equations linking light and matter, of maps of the heavens showing constellations that would not appear for thousands of years. One such document, described by later historians, was called the Book of the Seven Doors. It contained diagrams of concentric circles, each marked with letters in Greek, Coptic, and symbols resembling Hebrew. Marginal notes in Arabic referred to it as Al-Bab al-Sabai, the seventh gate, and claimed it was copied from the Wisdom of Alexandria, before the sea swallowed the vaults. No one knows where that book went. Some say it was lost when Mongol invaders destroyed Baghdad's libraries in 1258. Others believe copies survived, smuggled by Andalusian travelers to the west. But long before that, the ideas it contained had already spread, quietly infecting Europe's imagination. In the 12th century, a group of crusaders returning from the Holy Land brought with them a collection of strange artifacts, metal spheres etched with zodiacal symbols, scrolls written in Greek and Syriac, and a curious map showing the Nile flowing into what appeared to be an underground sea. Those crusaders would later form the nucleus of what became the Knights Templar. Officially, the Templars were soldiers of Christ, protectors of pilgrims. But in secret, many of their leaders were scholars, fluent in Arabic and Greek. During their time in the East, they had made contact with Muslim scientists, and possibly, through them, the last custodians of Alexandrian wisdom. One of the earliest Templar documents, the Rule of the Temple, refers cryptically to the hidden geometry of the Holy Land. Later legends claim the Templars discovered scrolls of Solomon beneath the ruins of the Temple Mount, yet the descriptions of those scrolls match not Hebrew scripture, but fragments of Hermetic and Alexandrian philosophy. Whatever they found changed them. Over 2 centuries, the Templars amassed immense wealth and knowledge. Their cathedrals and fortresses were designed with mathematical precision beyond their age, using ratios identical to those described in ancient Egyptian architecture. Some modern researchers believe their engineers rediscovered sacred geometry, the belief that certain proportions could harness natural energy, an idea traced directly to Alexandria's lost Hermetic schools. But power, once again, drew suspicion. By the 14th century, the Templars' influence threatened kings and popes alike. In 1307, under orders from Philip IV of France, they were arrested, tortured, and executed. Their archives vanished, sealed, hidden, or destroyed. Yet a handful escaped, taking with them books of wisdom older than Christ. Those fugitives scattered through Europe. Some fled to Scotland, others to Portugal. And wherever they went, new societies arose, Rosicrucians, alchemists, mystics, all claiming descent from ancient, secret knowledge. If you follow their writings, you see a pattern, the same symbols, the same phrasing, the same obsession with the unity of spirit and matter, the divinity within man. These are not coincidences. They are echoes of the Hermetic texts, echoes of Alexandria. Meanwhile, in Spain, another flame rekindled. When Muslim and Christian scholars began translating Arabic manuscripts in Toledo and Córdoba, they stumbled upon works unlike anything Europe had seen in centuries. Among them were texts attributed to Balinas, the Arab name for Apollonius of Tyana, a philosopher once rumored to have studied at Alexandria's library. One of his treatises, the Emerald Tablet, contained a single line that would shape centuries of thought. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below. It was the same phrase whispered in the library's shadowed halls before it burned, the creed of Hermeticism, the science of divine correspondence. From this fragment grew the Renaissance. Artists, scientists, and philosophers began to rediscover not just the knowledge of Greece, but the mystery of Egypt. Leonardo da Vinci filled his notebooks with geometric patterns and anatomical drawings eerily similar to Alexandrian diagrams. Paracelsus, the father of modern medicine, quoted the ancients of Egypt in describing the harmony of body and spirit. And when Isaac Newton studied alchemy in secret, he was reading translations of texts that could trace their lineage straight back to Alexandria. The library was gone, but its DNA had infected the world. Yet through all this, one question haunted scholars: where were the original scrolls? In 1620, a Jesuit missionary in Egypt wrote a letter to Rome describing a strange discovery near Rosetta. A farmer had unearthed a clay jar containing fragments of papyrus wrapped in lead foil. The text was mostly illegible, but one line could still be read. Hidden under the pillars of light, guarded by the watchers of the sun. The church dismissed the find as a hoax. But privately, certain Jesuits were obsessed with Alexandria. They believed that beneath the modern city, perhaps under the old Serapeum Hill, lay chambers untouched since antiquity. By the 18th century, explorers and mystics alike sought those hidden vaults. Napoleon's savants scoured the ruins of Egypt, sketching and cataloguing everything, while Freemasons incorporated Egyptian symbols into their secret rites. Their writings often mentioned the lost word, a mysterious phrase said to unlock divine truth. Could this have been a poetic memory of the knowledge once guarded in the library? If so, then that truth was still considered too dangerous for the world. For even in modern times, discoveries connected to Alexandria have quietly vanished. In 1940, during construction near the catacombs of El Shokafa, workers reportedly found a sealed corridor leading into the bedrock. They described walls covered in Greek and Coptic writing, including depictions of scrolls and celestial diagrams. When authorities arrived, the tunnel was closed for safety. No official excavation followed. The site remains sealed to this day. Those who study Alexandria's mysteries believe that beneath layers of silt and secrecy lies something far older than any library, a message encoded by civilizations that understood the balance between heaven and earth. And every time humanity edges close to rediscovering it, something, or someone, ensures it's buried again. From Alexandria to Baghdad, from the Templars to the Freemasons, one thread runs unbroken: the idea that knowledge is light, and light can blind. The Library of Alexandria was not just burned by accident. It was silenced because it carried truths that would collapse empires, rewrite scriptures, and reveal the divine blueprint of existence itself. But fire cannot kill a whisper. And that whisper still moves, through ink, through stone, through the coded architecture of cathedrals and the symbols on the dollar bill. Through the books of scientists who dream of unifying all laws of nature. Every age rediscovers a fragment, and every age buries it again. The year was 1479, and Florence breathed like a living flame. Under the arches of the Medici Palace, thunder rolled over the Arno as lamps flickered against marble walls. A handful of men bent over a soot-stained manuscript whose edges were curled like ash. The air smelled of rain and ink. Marsilio Ficino, philosopher and translator of Plato, held the parchment with trembling hands. The letters were unlike any he had seen, curved, fluid, alive. "This is not Greek," he whispered. "Nor Latin. It predates both." Cosimo de' Medici, the banker who ruled Florence with velvet and iron, leaned closer. The candlelight caught his silver hair. "Then what language speaks before the Greeks?" "Only one that came from Egypt," Ficino murmured. "Perhaps from the halls of Alexandria itself." Cosimo's eyes narrowed. So it survived. Rumors had long haunted the Mediterranean, of scrolls smuggled out before the flames of Caesar's siege, of monks hiding relics of knowledge too dangerous for kings or popes. If even one of those texts had reached Florence, then the Renaissance itself stood at the edge of revelation. For weeks Ficino worked in silence. The script yielded reluctantly, but patterns emerged, geometries of the heavens, harmonic numbers describing the motion of the stars, diagrams of human anatomy drawn with eerie precision. It was as if someone had mapped the invisible threads between spirit and matter. One night, the door creaked open. A young man entered, eyes bright with the intensity that would one day make him a legend. Leonardo da Vinci had come. Word of the Alexandrian manuscript had reached his master's workshop. Ficino pushed the parchment toward him. "Tell me what you see." Leonardo studied the diagrams, concentric circles nested like clockwork, notes on flight, sketches of water flowing through mechanical veins. "This is not philosophy," he said slowly. "It is design, the design of life itself." But with knowledge came fear. The church sensed a dangerous shift, the same unease that Roman generals once felt when scholars of Alexandria questioned divine authority. The Inquisition tightened its grip. Books burned again. Yet knowledge, like a seed, had already taken root. When Galileo Galilei turned his telescope toward the sky a century later, he unknowingly fulfilled the Alexandrian dream, to measure the divine by observation, not decree. His lenses revealed moons circling Jupiter, stars invisible to the naked eye, and a universe that refused to revolve around man. For the church, it was blasphemy. For the heirs of Alexandria, it was vindication. Galileo owned several banned works, Hermetic treatises copied from Ficino's Latin, notes on cosmic harmony, fragments said to come from ancient Egypt. He cited them cautiously, couching truth in metaphor. "The universe is written in the language of mathematics," he said. The phrase may as well have been lifted from the burned scrolls of the Great Library. In secret gatherings across Europe, scholars shared what they dared not print. Alchemists spoke of transmutation not merely as turning lead to gold but ignorance to wisdom. The old Hermetic axiom resurfaced, all is mind. To those who studied the stars or dissected the body, this meant that man could understand creation because he was part of it. That belief, simple, dangerous, divine, was what the fires of Alexandria had once tried to erase. And yet, even as new sciences bloomed, another force moved in the shadows to control them. The Vatican began collecting forbidden texts, locking them in what would become the secret archives. The lost manuscript, the one found in Florence, may have been among them. It is said that when Pope Clement VII invited artists and engineers to design St. Peter's Basilica, he insisted the proportions reflect the divine ratios mentioned in certain ancient works. Michelangelo's drawings show hints of the same geometry Ficino translated decades before. By the mid-16th century, Europe stood on the brink of transformation. Navigation, medicine, and physics all traced their lineage to those rediscovered fragments. The telescope, the compass, the anatomical chart, each bore the fingerprints of Alexandria. The Renaissance wasn't merely a rebirth of art, it was the resurrection of a worldview in which matter and spirit were one. But power fears enlightenment. The same truth that set men free threatened empires built on faith and obedience. The Church branded Hermeticism as heresy. The Medici line fell into intrigue and blood. Da Vinci's notebooks were hidden. Ficino's translations were condemned, then quietly absorbed into Christian mysticism. What had begun as light now retreated into secrecy once more. Still, the spark endured. Across the Channel, Isaac Newton studied alchemy and the occult as fervently as he studied gravity. In his private writings he cited the ancient philosophers of Egypt as the true fathers of science. To him, as to the lost librarians of Alexandria, God was not outside creation but woven through its laws. Centuries later, when archaeologists uncovered fragments of papyrus along the Nile, they found phrases identical to those in Newton's notebooks and Leonardo's sketches. Knowledge, it seemed, had traveled a vast circle, from Egypt to Greece, from Rome to Florence, and into the foundations of modern thought. The manuscript that surfaced in 1479 has never been found again. Some say it lies sealed beneath the Vatican. Others believe it rests in a private collection in Florence, its ink faded to ghostly traces. Yet its influence lives on in every equation, every canvas, every telescope pointed at the heavens. What was Alexandria trying to hide? Perhaps nothing sinister, only the truth that knowledge itself is divine, and that once mankind remembers that, no power can truly control him. And so, as the lamps of Florence burned low and the bells tolled for another dawn, the flame of the library burned quietly on, in the hearts of those who refused to forget that the universe was, and always would be, a book waiting to be read. The centuries that followed the Renaissance were an echo of Alexandria's heartbeat, steady, persistent, and often drowned beneath the noise of war and empire. The flame of knowledge that had once burned in the marble halls of the library now flickered within the minds of a few scattered men and women who sensed that the world was once unified by wisdom older than any creed. In 1666, a fire swept through London, consuming thousands of homes and the heart of the city. Amid the destruction, a young scientist named Isaac Newton worked feverishly at Trinity College, his rooms filled with lenses, prisms, and manuscripts written in his own secret code. Most remember Newton as the father of physics, but few realize how deeply he was haunted by the whispers of Alexandria. By candlelight he translated fragments of ancient alchemical texts that traced back to Hermetic philosophy, the same teachings Marsilio Ficino had resurrected 2 centuries earlier. To Newton, gravity was not merely a force, it was the invisible breath of God, the same divine motion described in the Book of Thoth. He filled thousands of pages with experiments, drawings, and metaphysical musings. Later generations would discard his alchemical work as madness. But to Newton, it was all one truth: the universe was alive, and man could read its script. When he died, his papers were sealed, scattered, or quietly taken by institutions that preferred the image of a rational scientist over that of a mystic philosopher. Among those papers was a note written in Latin: "The light of the ancients burns yet beneath the ashes." That light soon drew others. Across Europe, whispers spread of a brotherhood guarding the remnants of the old knowledge. They called themselves the Rosicrucians, a secret order said to possess scrolls from Egypt and coded maps of hidden libraries. In 1614, their manifestos appeared anonymously in Germany, proclaiming the dawn of a new age of enlightenment through science and spirit. The document symbols mirrored the sigils once painted on the walls of the Serapeum in Alexandria: the serpent biting its tail, the open eye, the radiant sun. Many dismissed it as fantasy. Yet, within a century, nearly every major scientist, from Descartes to Leibniz, was touched by the same ideal, that knowledge and divinity were not enemies but mirrors. The Rosicrucian dream flowed into the Enlightenment, shaping Freemasonry, inspiring secret salons in Paris and London, and setting the stage for revolutions both political and intellectual. Even as kings fell and republics rose, the question that had once burned in Alexandria endured: who should control knowledge, the few or the many? By the 18th century, explorers sailed under royal banners to the corners of the earth, driven by curiosity and conquest alike. When Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt in 1798, he brought not only soldiers but more than 100 scholars, architects, and engineers, the savants. They scoured temples and tombs, searching for the roots of Western civilization. In the sands of Rosetta, they unearthed the stone that would unlock the forgotten language of the pharaohs. But in their private journals, they spoke of something else: rumors of sealed catacombs beneath the site of ancient Alexandria, chambers that local priests claimed still held papyrus untouched since the time of Ptolemy. Napoleon himself ordered a detachment to investigate. What they found remains uncertain. Some claimed they discovered inscriptions describing the mechanism of the heavens, identical to those in the Hermetic texts of Ficino and Newton. The 19th century became the age of rediscovery and reinvention. With industrial power came a new hunger for ancient wisdom. Secret societies like the Theosophical Society, founded by Helena Blavatsky, revived the myths of Atlantis, Egypt, and Alexandria as keys to humanity's hidden potential. Scholars in Cairo and London exchanged letters about a second library, supposedly hidden beneath the waters of the Mediterranean after the city's decline. Divers reported stone corridors and statues glimpsed in the depths near the harbor, but the tides were treacherous, and most expeditions ended in silence. Then came the dawn of the 20th century, when science and mysticism parted ways. Laboratories replaced temples. Equations replaced prayers. But beneath the rational surface, the same pulse persisted. Nikola Tesla, in his New York workshop, often spoke of ancient knowledge from the East. He claimed that his ideas about wireless energy and resonance were inspired by translations of lost Egyptian texts, describing vibrations of the earth. Skeptics dismissed him, yet in private notebooks he drew spiral patterns identical to those found in Alexandrian depictions of cosmic sound. It was as though the library's ghost had never stopped teaching, only changing its language. When the Second World War erupted, the struggle for knowledge became literal. Both Allied and Axis powers hunted ancient artifacts, manuscripts, and relics said to contain powerful truths. In 1941, during a British excavation near Alexandria, archaeologists uncovered fragments of a mosaic floor depicting a globe surrounded by 7 concentric circles and an inscription that read, "Within the mind of man, the heavens turn." The discovery was quietly classified and stored away, labeled as mythological. Meanwhile, as the war ended, another revelation shook the academic world. In 1945, near the Egyptian town of Nag Hammadi, a farmer unearthed a seal jar filled with codices, early Christian and Gnostic writings. Some pages mirrored Hermetic concepts of the divine mind and creation as vibration. Historians realized that these texts likely came from the same intellectual current that had once flowed through the Library of Alexandria. For the first time in nearly 2 millennia, fragments of that ancient wisdom spoke again. But not everyone rejoiced. Religious authorities feared that the Nag Hammadi discoveries would undermine orthodox doctrine. Many texts were hidden, misfiled, or only partially released to the public decades later. Once again, it seemed, the old struggle between truth and control had returned. By the late 20th century, technology revived what empire and dogma had buried. Satellites mapped the Earth, revealing traces of vanished harbors and stone foundations beneath modern Alexandria. Sonar images hinted at submerged structures extending far into the bay. Some experts speculated they were remnants of the royal quarter, others whispered they were the last vaults of the Great Library. Expeditions were planned, then abruptly cancelled. Funding vanished. Official explanations cited safety concerns. Yet eyewitness accounts from divers told a different story. They described massive limestone blocks inscribed with mathematical symbols and hieroglyphs depicting stars. One diver claimed to have seen a chamber sealed by bronze doors, its lintel marked with a carving of a flame. When asked why he had not returned, he only said, "Because someone told me not to." And so, in the twilight of the 20th century, the Library of Alexandria seemed to stir beneath the waves, as if waiting. The world entered the digital age, a new library built not of papyrus but of code. Information spread faster than empire. Yet even now, the same question remains: what is allowed to be known, and what is quietly buried? Every few years, rumors resurface of private foundations funding underwater excavations off the Egyptian coast. Occasionally, fragments appear on the black market, papyrus in Greek and Demotic script, diagrams resembling early blueprints of astronomical devices. Most are quickly seized by authorities or lost in transit. Scholars who examine them report uncanny parallels to modern physics, the curvature of space, the vibration of matter, the unity of energy and consciousness. Perhaps the greatest secret of Alexandria was never the knowledge itself, but the idea that man and the divine are not separate, that to understand creation is to share in it. Such a notion terrifies institutions built on hierarchy. And so, the story circles back to its beginning. From the embers of the Serapeum to the candlelit studies of Florence, from Newton's quill to the hum of Tesla's coils, the same current flows, a golden thread connecting every age of discovery. What happened to the Library of Alexandria? Officially, it was burned, destroyed, forgotten. But perhaps it never truly died. Perhaps it simply changed form, passing from scroll to book, from mind to machine, from silence to the whisper of electricity. And what were they trying to hide? Not secrets of power or wealth, but the oldest truth of all, that knowledge is sacred, and that those who seek it are the true inheritors of the flame. The year is 2025. In the flicker of a computer screen, a researcher in Cairo scrolls through newly declassified satellite imagery. Amid the endless grids of digital data, something catches her eye, a rectangular outline beneath the Mediterranean, faint but deliberate. She zooms in. The shape aligns almost perfectly with the coordinates of the ancient Bruchayan district, the very heart of where the Great Library once stood. Her name is Dr. Layla Hassan, an Egyptian archaeologist raised within sight of the sea that swallowed so much of her nation's past. For years, she'd been told the library's story ended in fire. But her grandfather, also a scholar, used to whisper another tale: the library never burned, my child. It was buried. Hidden until men learned to seek knowledge without greed. Now, as her screen glowed in the darkness, Layla wondered if that time had finally come. Centuries had passed since Caesar's ships accidentally set Alexandria ablaze, yet every empire since had left its mark upon the mystery. From the caliphs of medieval Egypt to the French savants of Napoleon's expedition, every generation claimed to search for knowledge, but all feared what unfiltered truth could unleash. In hidden archives across Europe, certain manuscripts remain sealed, not for their fragility, but for their content. Documents detailing an ancient doctrine said to have been preserved by Alexandrian philosophers before the library's fall. They called it the doctrine of the living light. What it described would have upended the way civilizations understood creation. According to fragments later found among the Nag Hammadi texts, this doctrine taught that light was not just illumination, but consciousness, a divine awareness that formed the fabric of existence. Every star, every atom, even the human soul, was an expression of this living radiance. The same logos described in the Gospel of John, the same divine energy that modern physicists would later call the quantum field. It was the missing link between science and spirit, and the powers of every age had buried it for fear of losing control. In the late 1940s, as the world rebuilt itself after war, secret academic societies quietly resurfaced. One such group, known among insiders as the Custodians of the Flame, claimed to trace its lineage back to the original scholars of Alexandria. Its members included scientists, theologians, and even intelligence operatives. They believed fragments of the library had survived, smuggled into Constantinople before the final destruction and later scattered across Europe and the Middle East. Declassified British records from the 1960s mention a codex of fire, retrieved from a private collection in Istanbul. The codex, written in Greek and Coptic, allegedly detailed experiments in harnessing celestial sound to influence physical matter. Within weeks of its discovery, it vanished, confiscated under orders labeled national security. To the public, it was a myth. To those who understood what Alexandria truly represented, it was the beginning of something far greater. Back in Cairo, Dr. Layla Hassan submitted her findings discreetly to the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities. Within days, she received an unexpected email from a private foundation based in Geneva offering to fund an underwater excavation. The foundation's logo bore a single emblem, a golden flame. Layla accepted. Within months, her team assembled a collection of divers, historians, engineers, and one quiet observer from the foundation named David Mercer, whose credentials seemed polished but oddly opaque. From the first day on site, Layla noticed the intensity in his gaze whenever the topic of forbidden knowledge arose. By August, their sonar scans revealed what appeared to be a submerged complex, corridors, vaulted ceilings, and massive stone pillars, each oriented toward the rising sun. For the first time in recorded history, humanity stood on the edge of rediscovering the lost heart of Alexandria. Then, the interference began. Equipment malfunctioned. Funding transfers stalled. Local officials received anonymous threats warning that some stones should remain unturned. Still, Layla persisted. On a moonlit night, as the city lights shimmered across the waves, the divers descended once more. Beneath 30 feet of murky water, Layla's flashlight swept across a carved inscription half buried in coral. She brushed the sand away and froze. The words, in ancient Greek, read, "For those who seek truth without fear, the flame shall rise again." Her heart pounded. She called to the others, but before they could respond, her earpiece crackled with static. A voice, distorted, cold, whispered, "Stop the search." The line went dead. The next morning, half of her data logs were missing. Mercer was gone. His tent stood empty, his documents removed. But one thing remained, a torn scrap of parchment on her desk, written in English and Greek. It read, "The doctrine of the living light must not be revealed until the world is ready." Below the words was a faint symbol, the Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its tail, the same emblem carved into the marble floors of the ancient Serapeum. Layla knew then that the same forces that once burned scrolls now operated through silence, secrecy, and technology. What were they protecting, or hiding? Modern historians would say the library's destruction was the loss of books, but Layla began to suspect it was something more profound, the deliberate suppression of a truth that could unite science, faith, and human potential. The ancients had understood creation as vibration, light, and consciousness intertwined. The builders of Alexandria had encoded this in architecture, geometry, and myth. The Hermetica spoke of the universe as a song of the soul attuned to divine resonance. Yet if such knowledge became public, if humanity truly understood that the divine spark was within every person, then no empire, no church, no corporation could ever again claim authority over truth. That was the real reason the flames had been lit. One evening, after the official excavation was suspended under the pretext of safety violations, Layla sat alone on the shore, staring at the dark horizon. Waves crashed against the rocks like whispers of forgotten voices. She thought of Newton scribbling by candlelight, of Hypatia teaching beneath the colonnades before her death, of generations who had died to preserve even fragments of this knowledge. Then she remembered something her grandfather had once told her. The library was never a place, my child, it was a promise. A promise that light, truth, can never truly be extinguished. She opened her laptop and began to type. Not a report for the ministry, nor a plea for funding, but a chronicle, a detailed account of everything they had found, every symbol, every sonar reading, every threat. She encrypted the file and uploaded it to a hidden cloud network with a single caption. To the seekers of light, continue the work. Moments later, her screen flickered, and a message appeared from an unknown sender. The flame is not yours alone. You are part of the continuum. Then the message vanished. Weeks later, halfway across the world, in a research lab in Geneva, a group of physicists analyzed patterns in subatomic resonance. Their lead scientist, a quiet man with the same calm intensity as Mercer, paused over the data. The equations mirrored ancient diagrams found in the Hermetica. He smiled faintly. It seems, he murmured, they already knew. Outside, snow fell softly, white as parchment. And somewhere beneath the sea, the ruins of the library slumbered, its knowledge no longer lost, only waiting for the world to remember. Some historians say knowledge shapes history. But perhaps it's the other way around. History is the battlefield where knowledge fights to be remembered. From Alexandria to Florence, from London to Cairo, every fire and every silence has been part of the same struggle. For those who guard truth, fear is the weapon. For those who seek it, memory is the torch. And so, the Library of Alexandria endures, not in marble, not in scrolls, but in the mind of every soul that dares to ask, what if there's more? Because there always was. There always is. The flame never died. It simply moved to where no fire could reach. The world had moved on, but the shadow of Alexandria had never truly faded. In the modern age, an era of data, satellites, and ceaseless information, the ancient silence that once buried the library began to crack. Everywhere, small fragments surfaced, forgotten papyri in private collections, coded manuscripts in monasteries, cryptic notes in the journals of Renaissance thinkers. To most, these were curiosities. To those who knew, they were breadcrumbs. After her disappearance from the Cairo project, rumors spread about Dr. Layla Hassan. Some claimed she fled Egypt. Others believed she had been silenced. But a few, those who monitored the encrypted archives of underground networks, knew the truth. She was still communicating, hidden under aliases, sending fragments of her research to scattered circles of historians and scientists. Her encrypted signature became legendary, LH_continuum. Through these anonymous messages, she revealed pieces of what she had found before the excavation was shut down. Beneath the waves, she had uncovered not just ruins but evidence of replication, architectural symmetry identical to ancient sites in Greece, India, and even Central America. As if civilizations separated by oceans had once shared a single design language, a common geometry of the divine. How could that be, unless the knowledge had been global, dispersed, yet born from one original source? The library, she claimed, had not merely collected the world's wisdom. It had coordinated it. Alexandria had been the central node of a planetary network of learning, a network lost when its flame was snuffed out. Her last published paper, before her digital trail vanished again, ended with one haunting line. The library was not destroyed, it was disconnected. Months later, in the quiet vaults beneath the Vatican Library, Cardinal Lucien Morel examined an aging leather-bound codex. The cover bore the insignia of the ancient Serapeum, the same Ouroboros that Layla had found underwater. He had been custodian of forbidden texts for decades, a keeper of secrets older than Christendom itself. He turned a brittle page. There, in faded ink, was a passage copied from a Greek original said to be salvaged from Alexandria before the fall. When men forget their origin, the stars will fade. But when the hidden flame returns, they shall remember that the light was never above them, but within. Morel sighed. He knew the words well. They were almost identical to verses found in the Corpus Hermeticum, a text the Church had quietly absorbed but publicly denounced for centuries. He looked toward the crucifix on the wall and murmured, "What if the word we protect is the same light we once condemned?" The candle flickered. A soft knock echoed from the door. A younger priest entered, pale with unease. "Eminence, there's been a breach in the archives. Someone accessed the restricted vault." "Who?" "We don't know. But they took Codex 47, the one labeled Ignis Veritatis. The Fire of Truth. Morel closed the old manuscript slowly. Then it begins again, he whispered. The first challenge. One evening, Elena received an anonymous message, a scholar claiming to possess fragments of the Aramaic text she had studied, but with a warning. The word seeks balance. Some will not respect it. Choose wisely, or it will be lost. Elena hesitated. She knew she could not simply retrieve the fragments without risking exposure. But the message hinted at the ongoing struggle to protect the word. The archives were alive, not only testing her, but orchestrating events to ensure the continuation of its preservation. She realized that the challenge ahead was not merely academic, nor spiritual. It was deeply human. The word demanded vigilance, humility, and courage, but also strategy and discernment. The weight of history. Elena walked through the streets of Rome, gazing at the basilica. To the world, it was a place of faith and history. To her, it was a labyrinth of secrets, of living knowledge, of choices whose consequences could ripple across centuries. She thought of the vision in the archives, cities destabilized by revelation, scholars consumed by ambition, faith shaken to its core. She understood the gravity of her role, not merely to guard the word, but to steward its timing, its interpretation, and its eventual revelation to humanity. The light in her study pulsed once more. The word was patient, eternal, and vigilant. And so would she be. Elena realized she was no longer a historian. She was a custodian, a guardian of knowledge that transcended history, faith, and human ambition. And the world would have to wait. The global web. Elena awoke before dawn, the letter's faint glow casting a soft luminescence across her study. It had been weeks since the Custos warning, yet sleep came in short bursts, punctuated by visions of history's hidden layers. The archives had chosen her, but they had also called others, custodians scattered across the globe, each bearing fragments of the word. Her task was no longer solitary. She was now part of a living network, one invisible to the world, yet critical to humanity's preservation. The first contact. Elena's first step was locating potential allies. She sent encrypted messages, veiled in academic language, to historians, linguists, and theologians whose work hinted at obscure knowledge. Within days, responses began to arrive, each carefully worded, testing her intent and discretion. One reply stood out, a scholar in Jerusalem named Dr. Amir Khalid. He claimed to have discovered Aramaic fragments matching descriptions in Elena's letter. Yet his tone carried a cautionary note. The knowledge you pursue is alive. It tests the heart as well as the mind. Only the prepared may bear it. Elena smiled grimly. This was the network the Custos had hinted at. And Amir was its first sign. The hidden codices. Elena arranged to meet Amir in a secluded library in East Jerusalem. The room smelled of dust and time, the walls lined with manuscripts and scrolls that had never been catalogued publicly. Amir revealed several codices, each containing texts suppressed in canonical histories, lost gospels, letters from early disciples, and commentary on sacred relics. Some pages bore symbols she recognized from the Vatican archives. Others, she realized, contained new information, cross-references to hidden chambers and secret custodians unknown even to the Vatican. But not all within the custodians agreed. A quiet rebellion was forming, a splinter group calling themselves the Heirs of the Flame. They believed humanity had matured enough to receive the knowledge once guarded in secrecy. Among them were rogue archivists, AI researchers, and theologians who saw no conflict between faith and physics. Their leader operated under an alias known only as Orion. Using encrypted networks, he coordinated the release of ancient material into the public domain, unclassified Vatican records, lost Alexandrian fragments, and cross-referenced translations of Hermetic scrolls. Each file bore the same message. The light remembers. Layla Hassan was rumored to be among them, though her name never appeared. Yet one night, as Orion broadcast a live message to their hidden followers, his feed was interrupted. A second figure appeared beside him, her face veiled in shadow but her voice unmistakable. Knowledge was never the enemy, she said softly. Fear was. Alexandria fell because truth became a threat. But every age rebuilds its library, not with stone, but with connection. You are the architects now. Do not let the light fade again. The feed cut to black. In the following months, fragments of the doctrine surfaced everywhere, encoded in AI research papers, woven into music theory, embedded in blockchain ledgers. Most people never noticed, but for those who watched carefully, the flame was spreading. Universities began quietly revisiting ancient philosophies, physicists revisited Hermetic texts to find parallels with quantum theory. Even the Vatican issued a discreet statement encouraging dialogue between science and spirituality, a gesture unseen in centuries. It was as if, across the world, the library was rising again, this time without walls, without masters. Still, deep beneath the Mediterranean, silence reigned over the ruins. The sunken halls of the great library slept under layers of coral and time. Yet if one were to dive there now, past the sands and shadows, they might notice faint glows where torches once burned, bioluminescent organisms forming spirals along the stone carvings, tracing the same golden patterns found in Layla's diagrams. Nature itself had become the new librarian, guarding the memory of what humanity had once almost destroyed. And somewhere, far above, in a quiet room lit by the same Mediterranean dawn that once shone on the library's marble steps, Dr. Layla Hassan typed her final message. Knowledge cannot be killed, only delayed. Every age buries it differently, under religion, under empire, under data. But truth has patience. It waits beneath the noise, beneath the fear. Alexandria was not an ending. It was a seed. She pressed send. Moments later, servers across the world pinged with the encrypted upload. Within hours, the document spread beyond containment, mirrored, shared, and archived in thousands of hidden corners of the web. For the first time since the flames of Caesar, the light of Alexandria burned again, not in scrolls, but in circuits. And though governments and corporations raced to contain it, they were already too late. Because the world had finally remembered. Dawn spread across the Mediterranean like the slow unfurling of an ancient scroll. The sea, that had swallowed centuries of silence, shimmered with the same gold that once gilded the pillars of the great library. From a balcony overlooking the harbor, Dr. Layla Hassan watched the first rays touch the water. She had returned to Alexandria, not to excavate, but to listen. It had been months since her last transmission, and the world had changed. Across continents, universities were quietly re-evaluating their histories. Physicists quoted Hermetic fragments in academic papers, philosophers began speaking of conscious light in the language of quantum fields. The flame had spread far beyond any one person's control. Yet the truth remained incomplete. Layla had followed one final clue, a letter preserved in the Vatican's restricted archives, written in the 11th century by a monk named Anselm of Byzantium. The parchment described a vault sealed beneath the ruined Serapeum, containing tablets of glass that hold the sky. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as metaphor. Layla suspected otherwise. The custodians of the flame, fractured and fearful, had tried to track her since Geneva. But the world had shifted beneath them. Knowledge, once chained, now moved at the speed of thought. Every attempt to erase a truth only scattered it further, like sparks from a single ember igniting a forest. So she went alone. Beneath the modern city, through tunnels carved by Roman engineers and widened by Ottoman masons, she descended until the air tasted of salt and thyme. Her flashlight swept over mosaics depicting stars, serpents, and a sun emerging from a lotus. At last she reached a doorway sealed with basalt and bronze. Etched into its arch were words in Greek. Within is the mirror of the heavens. She placed her palm upon the bronze. The metal hummed faintly, as if remembering her touch. A deep vibration rolled through the chamber. The door parted. Inside lay a hall no wider than a cathedral nave. Pillars rose like petrified flames, their surfaces lined with crystal veins that glowed when her light struck them. At the center stood a circular dais, upon which rested a slab of translucent stone, smooth as water. Beneath it shimmered symbols, stars, circles, and spirals, moving slowly, alive with light. Layla gasped. It wasn't a tomb. It was a map, not of Earth, but but of resonance itself. Each point of light corresponded to a frequency, a vibration woven through matter and space. When she touched one, a tone rang out, soft and clear, like the note of a harp. Another touch, another tone. Together they formed chords, harmonies of the cosmos. She understood then what the ancients had meant by the doctrine of the living light. They had not worshipped stars, they had tuned themselves to them. The library had been more than a repository of texts, it was an instrument, a resonant archive designed to awaken the memory of unity between mind and creation. Her recorder blinked red. She whispered into it, they didn't just study the heavens, they sang with them. Footsteps echoed behind her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice she knew. David Mercer, now unmasked, his expression less of menace than fatigue. "You were never meant to see this." Layla kept her hand on the crystal. "You knew it was here." "We've always known," he admitted. "But knowledge like this isn't meant for the masses. Civilization needs mystery. Without it, order collapses." "Or control," she said. "That's what you fear losing." Mercer's gaze softened. "Do you think humanity is ready to hold the truth? To realize every soul is light itself? Look at history, every revelation births another war." Layla smiled sadly. "Then perhaps we've mistaken war for labor pains." He hesitated, the glow of the chamber painting both their faces in amber. "You would release it? Even knowing it could burn the world?" She looked around, the shimmering pillars, the flowing geometry, the living sound. "Fire doesn't only destroy. It also illuminates." She pressed both palms to the dais. A surge of light burst outward, flooding the hall in cascading color. The vibrations resonated through the stone, through the tunnels, through the city above. Birds took flight. The harbor waters trembled as if stirred by an unseen wind. Across the planet, instruments sensitive to electromagnetic shifts recorded an inexplicable pulse, an echo matching the golden ratio. Mercer shielded his eyes. "What have you done?" "I've kept a promise," she said. The light intensified, then softened, resolving into images projected above the dais, fragments of the past. Scholars in white robes reading under oil lamps, Hypatia teaching beneath marble columns, ship captains unloading papyrus scrolls from across the world. Alexandria lived again in spectral form, every thought and voice preserved in light. Tears blurred Layla's vision. "They recorded consciousness," she whispered. "The library wasn't destroyed, it was encoded in frequency." Mercer stared in awe. "A library written in light." "And in us," she added. "Every living being is part of the same archive." The vision shifted, revealing maps of constellations intertwined with neural pathways, galaxies mirroring the structure of the human brain. The ancients had known what modern science was only beginning to see, the macrocosm and microcosm were reflections, God seeing himself in endless forms. Mercer stepped forward, captivated. "If this is released, religion, science, everything changes." "Exactly," she said softly. "Everything unites." He turned toward her, torn between duty and revelation. "They'll never allow it. They can't stop it. It's already begun." Above them, the holographic images coalesced into a single luminous shape, a circle within a triangle within a sphere. Lines of text spiraled outward in dozens of ancient languages. At the center, a phrase in pure, living light appeared. "Let the light within remember itself." Then the glow faded, leaving silence. Layla realized the recording crystal had absorbed the entire display. She slipped it into her pack. "You have a choice, David. Help me share this, or try to bury it again." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he bowed his head. Maybe the world deserves another chance. They left the chamber together, the door sealing behind them with a low hum. Outside, the dawn had risen fully over Alexandria, gilding the ruins with warmth. 3 months later, under the guise of a global symposium on archaeology and consciousness, Layla and Mercer presented their findings. They showed only fragments, mathematical patterns, harmonic correlations, optical scans of the crystal structures, but the implications rippled through every discipline. Physicists confirmed that the resonances matched cosmological background frequencies. Historians recognized symbols from disparate cultures. Theories once ridiculed as mysticism were suddenly discussed in laboratories. Across faiths, leaders began dialogues unseen in millennia. The Dalai Lama quoted Hermetic passages beside quantum equations. A Catholic cardinal invoked the lux viva, the living light, in a homily about unity. Even governments funded research into conscious resonance technologies, though few grasped their spiritual weight. The idea spread faster than censorship could contain it. Light is not separate from us. We are expressions of it. Children painted spirals of light on classroom walls, musicians tuned their compositions to natural frequencies once used in ancient temples. People began to sense what the library's founders had known, that knowledge was not possession but participation. Some feared chaos. Yet what followed was quieter, a slow thawing of centuries of division. Not miracles, but understanding. Layla watched this from her apartment overlooking the harbor. The air buzzed faintly, as if the city itself were humming an old forgotten song. She knew there would still be resistance, still power-hungry men trying to twist the revelation into profit or control. But something irreversible had happened. The world had glimpsed its reflection in the mirror of the heavens. She opened her journal and wrote. The library's secret was never about storing knowledge, it was about awakening memory. Every soul carries a fragment of that archive. When we remember together, the flame returns. Outside, church bells mingled with the muezzin's call, their tones harmonizing across the city in a resonance that felt almost deliberate. The sound reached the sea, spread through the waves, and traveled farther than any scroll ever had. And in that sound was the promise of Alexandria, alive again. Night had returned to Alexandria, and the city seemed to breathe in rhythm with the waves. The cornice shimmered under amber streetlights, and the silhouettes of fishing boats rocked like punctuation marks upon an unfinished sentence. For Dr. Layla Hassan, it was the calm before the echo, the hush that always comes before a revelation becomes history. Across the globe, the first ripples of her discovery had already begun to distort the surface of civilization. The symposium had been intended for a few hundred scholars. Now, within weeks, billions had watched fragments of the recordings online. Governments tried to classify them. Tech companies tried to claim them. Religious councils convened emergency synods. And through the noise, one question pulsed like a heartbeat. What were the ancients really trying to tell us? Layla reread the final line from her own notebook. When we remember together, the flame returns, and felt the weight of its truth. The library had never perished in fire, humanity had. What burned was the idea that knowledge belonged to everyone. Now that flame had been rekindled. Echoes of the past. 2 weeks after the symposium, Layla was invited to Rome under the quiet patronage of Cardinal Matteo di Rossi. The Vatican's inner archives, built upon layers of forgotten catacombs, had once held fragments from the very library she'd rediscovered. Inside a chamber perfumed with ancient paper and myrrh, Matteo laid before her an object wrapped in linen, a small, clear tablet no thicker than a leaf, etched with symbols of Egyptian, Greek, and Aramaic origin. "We found this in 1892, he said. It sang when touched, but only once. We called it the Silent Psalm." Layla traced the markings. They matched the crystalline resonators she'd found beneath the serapeum. "It's part of the same system," she murmured. "The ancients must have encoded thought as vibration." Matteo looked uneasy. "Do you realize what that means?" The logos, the word, was literal. Creation itself is resonance. "It means Genesis was written in frequency," she said softly. "And we are all syllables of that divine sound." The cardinal crossed himself. "Then perhaps redemption is not belief, but remembering our tone." For a moment they stood in reverent silence. Then Matteo lifted the tablet toward the light. A faint glow awakened inside it, pulsing to the rhythm of their breathing. The hidden continuum. While Rome stirred, Cairo trembled. The Egyptian Antiquities Authority, under pressure from international powers, sealed the tunnels beneath the modern library. But the energy release Layla had triggered had already done its work. Satellite arrays across the world detected subtle oscillations matching the ancient harmonic ratios. In laboratories from Kyoto to Princeton, scientists observed spontaneous coherence in light fields, photons aligning in patterns as though following an invisible conductor. Mercer sent her encrypted messages daily. "They're calling it the Alexandrian anomaly," he wrote. "Everywhere they look, they find the same geometry." Layla replied, "It's the resonance of remembrance. The world's consciousness is tuning itself." Still, she feared what would come next. Power never surrenders gracefully. The old custodians, political, corporate, and spiritual, had spent millennia weaving their dominion around ignorance. Now truth was a contagion no firewall could contain. The crystal floor brightened until the chamber seemed to dissolve into the sky itself. And in that weightless space, they beheld what no telescope had ever revealed, the universe as a living lattice of light, each star a node, each human heart a spark within the same network. The library had never been a building. It was creation itself. The covenant of light. When the vision subsided, they found themselves kneeling on cool stone. The artifacts were gone, their matter transmuted into the dais, which now pulsed with a steady, heartbeat rhythm. Upon its surface glowed a final inscription, new, yet ancient. "Guard not the flame, be it." Mercer exhaled, trembling. So this is the real secret they were hiding. Layla nodded. That divinity is not elsewhere. It's the substance of our awareness. To hide that truth was to enslave the world. He laughed softly, the sound half joy, half despair. And we've built empires on forgetting. Outside, thunder rolled. Yet there was no storm, only the vibration of awakening spreading through the crust of the earth like music finding its rhythm. In that moment, Layla understood, the rediscovered harmony would not end in Alexandria. It would spread through every soul attuned enough to listen. She looked up at the glowing ceiling and whispered, "Let there be light." The great unveiling. Within a year, humanity began to change in ways no prophet or scientist had predicted. The electromagnetic pulse recorded the night of the Serapeum's awakening repeated itself in cycles, each time aligning with global surges in creativity and empathy. Artists across continents painted identical symbols in their dreams. Languages began evolving toward common phonetic roots. Wars slowed. Markets reeled. Power structures, unable to adapt, fractured under the weight of collective awareness. In universities, new departments emerged: resonant archaeology, conscious physics, theology of frequency. The old boundaries between science and spirit blurred into luminous vapor. The world was not instantly healed, but it was listening. And in that listening, something ancient began to sing again. Layla withdrew from public life. Her name became legend, her image debated, her discoveries mythologized. Yet those who found her, pilgrims, scientists, children, always said the same thing, that her eyes carried the reflection of a flame unseen yet unmistakably real. The final revelation. Years later, when her hair had turned silver and her steps had slowed, Layla returned once more to the harbor. The modern Library of Alexandria gleamed before her, its facade etched with scripts from every language on Earth, a mirror of the unity she had spent her life restoring. A young journalist approached, camera trembling. "Dr. Hassan," he said, "there are rumors that the energy beneath the city still pulses. Some say it's conscious. Is it true?" She smiled gently. "Truth isn't a secret to be kept. It's a song to be remembered." He frowned. But what was the library hiding, really? Layla turned her gaze to the horizon, where the sun met the sea. "They weren't hiding something from us," she said. "They were hiding us from ourselves." The journalist blinked. "I don't understand." "You will," she whispered. "When you start to hear the light." Then, as the last rays of evening bathed the library's walls, a low hum rose from the depths, soft, steady, unmistakable. The sea answered in kind, shimmering as though lit from within. The air filled with a golden resonance that made strangers pause mid-stride, eyes wide with wonder. Some wept. Some laughed. All felt the same thing, the ancient memory of unity stirring awake. Layla closed her eyes and let the vibration pass through her. It was the same frequency she had touched beneath the serapeum, the tone of creation, the first and last word of every language. When she opened them again, the stars were already visible above the city. Each one flickered like a spark of parchment rekindled after millennia. She whispered, almost to herself, the library was never lost. It just changed form. Her voice carried on the sea breeze, mixing with the endless hum until both became indistinguishable. And in that moment, somewhere between history and eternity, Alexandria remembered its light. Centuries later, historians would debate whether the events in Alexandria were legend, science, or divine intervention. But every theory led back to the same conclusion: knowledge had once again become flame. And somewhere in the archives of the New World, a network of light rather than paper, one phrase still glowed in living resonance. Let the light within remember itself.